All right, so today we're going to talk about how to collect anything, whether it's comics, video games, trading cards, stamps, action figures, autographs, game used memorabilia. There are some rules that go along with every collecting category that will help you build your collection and invest, spend your money as wisely as possible when you are buying these items for your collection. I've collected things my entire life. I collected Supreme and streetwear and sneakers and trading cards and everything you see behind me here. And so hopefully you can use some of the things that I've learned in my 15, 20 plus years of collecting to help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made. So really there's a million tips I could give you, but we're gonna stick to the 5 biggest ones today. First off, know your goals. And I'm not gonna belabor the point on this one, but this one should be pretty obvious. If you're collecting something just because you enjoy it and you wanna have it on your shelf and you don't care what it's worth in the future at all, then you can sort of like stop this video right here and not watch anymore, right? Like no one can tell you what you like and what you're going to enjoy. So if you want to collect just purely to collect, then just do that. Buy what you like, and it is as simple as that. Now, if you want to invest, there's a whole different strategy to that. Now, also, I think it's worth pointing out, there's a big spectrum here, right? Like it doesn't have to be really one or the other. You don't have to just collect or just invest. For me, I try to collect things that I think are going to be really valuable in the long haul, but also things that I really enjoy right now. So I actually think, when you do that, you sort of hit this sweet spot of, hey, I really like this thing and I really think it's gonna go up in value. But when you really like the thing, I think you're in a better position to actually make smart decisions about what's going to be important and what's going to be desirable in the long term. Like I said, if you like the item and you care about the item, you're probably going to just have a little bit better intuition about what those really important collectibles are going to be over the next few years, as opposed to just buying into the hype or buying things that aren't really important. So number one, know your goals. And like I said, doesn't have to be one or the other, can be both. That's actually what I recommend. But collecting or investing or both, those are sort of your options. I like going for both. Number 2, and I cannot stress this enough, research rarity. Know how rare something is before you buy it. In some instances, like trading cards or some certain action figures, you'll see that items are actually sequentially numbered, or they'll say, limited edition of 300 or 500. You'll see this in art a lot too, where you'll have originals that are really one of ones, and you'll have prints that are often limited to, 50, 100, 150, whatever it is. In those instances, it's pretty easy to know how rare something is, right? You know exactly how many are made. You don't have to do any research. You don't have to worry about any of that. But when you're buying things where the print run is unknown, that's where it can get really tricky, and you really need to do a bit of research. So my number one piece of advice as it relates to this, and you're going to find this out pretty quickly, that eBay is like your best friend when it comes to researching collectibles. If you're trying to buy a certain item, let's say you're buying a specific Funko Pop and you're not sure if it's rare or not. Maybe you saw one at the store, or you were at a shop and someone had it, or you found one on Instagram that you thought was cool. The first thing you should do is you should go on eBay, type it in, and see how many are readily available. Now say you go there and you type it in and you see there's 200 available right now. Well, you know for a fact that item is not rare. If there's 200 on eBay, there's probably 20,000 out there. So it's worth checking that, number one. Now just because an item is not rare doesn't mean that you can't make money on it, but it's really unlikely to have something that isn't rare go up a lot. You might get a 20, 50, even 100% gain on an item like this, but it's really, really difficult to find an item that isn't rare and hit a 5, 10, 20x. Can be done, but really, really unlikely, really, really hard to do. When you're researching your rarity, it's also important to realize there are different levels of rarity here. It's not just like rare or not rare. Again, this is a real spectrum. You can have things that there's really only one of, and you can have things that there's basically infinite supply of. Now, say you go on eBay and you type it in, Funko Pop, whatever, and nothing comes up. That's a good sign, but you should also check completed listings too. Go and check how many have sold in the last 60 days or how many have sold in the last 90 days. For trading cards, there's a really great tool called Card Ladder that lets you actually look at completed sales history for eBay listings from up to about 10 years ago. So you can go and type in a card and you can see exactly how many of that card have sold in the last 10 years. If it's 1 or 2 or 3, you're in really good company. Even if it's less than 10 or 20, you're probably in a pretty good spot. But sometimes there's just an item that hasn't been listed on eBay in the last 30 or 60 days that isn't really that rare. But if you find one of these tools like a Card Ladder for trading cards, you can very quickly see, okay, hey, in the last 10 years, there's only been 4, 5, 6, 7 of this item sold, okay, I know I'm in good company. I know this is a very rare item, and you really want to know how rare something is before you buy it, because sometimes you might see an item and you're new to collecting and it's the first one that got listed in 7 or 10 days and you're excited and you think it really might be this once in a lifetime opportunity to buy the item, so you place a really big bid. Well, if you had done a little bit of homework, you might realize, hey, one of these comes up every 3 or 4 weeks, and I don't need to jump into buying this one right now if it's overpriced. So something you really want to consider is the rarity of an item. And you also want to consider alongside the rarity is what I call sort of replaceability of an item. Maybe you find an item that is really rare, but if there's a similar item that might also scratch that itch for collectors in the same way as the rare item that you're looking at, but that other item that's really similar isn't rare, that can really detract from the value of the rarer item. So this can sort of happen with different prints of video games, right? If you look at like a 5th print versus a 4th print, maybe the 5th print of a video game is really rare and the 4th one's pretty common, but who really cares that much about the difference between a 5th print and a 4th print of a video game, unless maybe it's one of the top 5 or 10 video games of all time, right? So in that instance, just because that 5th print video game might be rare doesn't mean that you want to go and splurge on it, because there's something that is replaceable for that item, that is comparable to that item, that doesn't cost nearly as much and isn't nearly as rare. So this is something to consider too, is think about comparable items. Try to find, something that in trading cards you can find maybe similar years, cards that are numbered to a similar amount. In video games, similar titles. Maybe you're looking at a Mario Party 4, but you compare against a Mario Party 5. Think about these comparable items and what their prices are and how rare they are. These are all something that you need to consider, and they're all part of researching the rarity of an item. Rarity is so important as it relates to making sure that you buy something that is going to go up in value over time. Because if you have something truly rare, people can't undercut you all the time. I sort of joke that I've never lost money on a one-of-one trading card, meaning one that's the only one in the world. And the reason that that's the case is if you're patient, no one can undercut you. And in the same way, if you have an item that's limited to 5, 10, 20 copies, maybe something that just really rarely comes for sale, you're not going to really be undercut on other people's prices. Whereas if you have an item where there's hundreds or thousands of them readily available, you're going to be playing this game of trying to lower your price and lower your price and lower your price to have the lowest price available on the open market. And that's how an item never really goes up in price, is when you have an item that isn't rare and everyone's undercutting each other. That's a recipe for an item that goes down over time, not one that goes up over time. So that's one of the keys with rarity. You want to make sure that you have an item that doesn't come for sale that often, because it really lets you control your own destiny on the pricing. And you also don't want to get in a situation here too where you have a rare item but your finances aren't good and you need to sell that item right away. When you're selling something really rare, you often want to have patience. Maybe it's something you list as a buy it now for 5 or 10 times what you paid for it, and you just let it sit, and maybe you get a great offer and maybe you don't. Maybe it takes 5 minutes to sell it, maybe it takes 5 years to sell it for what you're asking for. But when you're patient with a rare item, that's when you really win. Now to my third point, just because an item is rare doesn't mean that it's going to be investment grade. You also have to consider the importance. Not every item is important. Not every rare item is important. Collectibles are really your typical sort of supply and demand, right? Just because the supply is low of something, if the demand is also low, that doesn't mean that it's going to have any value in the long run, right? I mean, you could think about artists who never really had any traction. They make these unique original paintings. They're not really investment grade if that artist never really does anything with their career, or there's just not really demand for that product. I think the same way with trading cards. You have really bad players who have these really rare cards, and most times those are not investment grade cards. Unless it's from a really important set, it's really unlikely that that item will be investment grade long term. So just because something is rare doesn't mean that it's going to be valuable. So what do you really look for when you consider the importance of something? For me, I just like to think about how much will collectors care about this item in 5, 10, 20 years. Will it still be relevant or will it not be? And I think when you use this barometer, it really sort of lets you hone in on what are going to be the important collectibles in this certain category long term. One of the things that can make an item very important, and this is true across multiple categories, is if the item is a first. So we see this a lot in trading cards with your rookie card. We see it in comics with the first appearance of Batman or the first appearance of Spider-Man. These are epic collectibles that have really great long-term value. See it in video games too. The first print of the NES Super Mario Bros. Game is one of the most iconic, most valuable video games of all time, if not the most valuable. So firsts are very important, and I think that's true across almost every category. Now there's also a hierarchy to firsts, right? Like you have the first Super Mario Bros. Game, but you also have the first print Super Mario Bros. 2 game, and that's important too. And it's not as important as the first one, but it is important in and of itself as well. So, you got to think about the hierarchy of firsts, which first is most important. But whenever you can have a first, and sometimes in certain sets, in certain categories, certain collectibles, you can have multiple firsts with one item. Like a really good example of this is LeBron James rookie patch autograph. It was the first rookie patch autograph. It was the first exquisite set. It was the first year of LeBron's career. And it is no coincidence that this is a multi-million-dollar card. So to recap, think about the long-term importance, and firsts are always good no matter what. Now maybe you've crafted your thesis around, hey, I think X is going to be a really great long-term investment. I think category Y is going to blow up in the next 5 or 10 years. So you have your thesis now, but what are some practical tips as it actually relates to buying, holding, knowing when to sell? The first thing is really important with buying. It's called dollar cost averaging. People use this strategy in all sorts of investing, whether it's the stock market or collectibles, this still applies. Let's use an example here. If you have $10,000 cash that you want to put into collectibles, and by the way, side note, do not overextend yourself in collectibles. 100% of your portfolio should never be in anything. Use collectibles as a diversification tool. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, dollar cost averaging, right? So you have $10,000 you want to put into collectibles. If you just go on eBay and bid on 5 or 10 really big items right away and win them all on the same day, well, what happens if that whole market goes down 10, 20% over the course of the coming month or 2 months? These collectibles markets are very influenced by macroeconomics. We've seen over the last 6 to 12 months, as the economy has struggled a bit, many of these collectible categories have come down too. And if you bought all these items at the peak, well, now you're down a lot and you're in trouble. What you should really do is, let's say you have that 10,000, maybe in the first month you spend 1,000, and the second month you spend 1,000, and maybe you wait a month or two and then you spend another 2,000, and you just spread out your spend. That's all dollar cost averaging really means, and that allows you to get into collectibles at different points for the overall market, right? Like when the overall market is up, it's okay to buy some during that time, but you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket and the overall market comes down. So by dollar cost averaging, you just know that you're going to get into a situation where you're buying in at the middle. Now you could get really lucky if you spend your 10,000 bucks right away and you could buy in at the bottom, but you could also have the same situation where you buy in at the top and then you're really in trouble. Or it might take you a lot longer to recoup that money. You might have to hold those items a lot longer in order to profit. So to really just sort of almost guarantee that you're buying in at the middle, dollar cost average, buy things over a longer period of time. If you have a budget of $10 or $20 or $50,000 or even $500, just spread it out a little bit. Just don't go all in at one moment. And that's one of the things that's great about being a collector is if you really love it, you sort of do this naturally, right? Like you're not just buying things for one period of time if you really love collecting. It's sometimes why I think collectors will often be better investors than pure investors is because they're dollar cost averaging because they love what they're buying and they're often buying it, spreading it out over long periods of time. It's a passion and they get a really good dollar cost average by doing that. So always dollar cost average, whether it's collectibles or any other sort of investment vehicle, you're probably going to want a dollar cost average. And finally, the fifth point that I have is one that's really important because I think it can be really hard to know when to sell an item. But my rule for when I will sell an item is if I wouldn't buy it at its current market price, then I should sell it at its current market price. When you're a collector and an investor, you'll see opportunities left and right about items that you can buy that you think are underpriced or are going to be more valuable in the future. So if you have items that at their current market price you wouldn't buy them, then you should sell those items immediately and put that money into the items that you would buy at the current market price. This might mean you bought a card at $1,000 $1,000 and it goes up to $5,000 and you thought it was a great buy at $1,000, but now at $5,000 you probably wouldn't buy it. Well, you should sell it. But in the same way, maybe you bought a comic for $10,000 and now it's at $5,000, and maybe you know more now and you realize it's not as rare as you thought it once was, and a lot of new comics in that same comic went into the pop report at a higher grade, and you're just realizing, hey, you know, this probably isn't going to be important long term. And even though you bought it at $10,000 at one point, maybe now you wouldn't even buy it at $5,000. Well, I would sell that item too, right? Don't get caught holding on to your losers. If you buy something and it goes down in value and you realize, hey, this was a bad buy, I wouldn't even buy it for what it costs now, then it's something that you should sell. I just think this is a really great rule to know when to buy and when to sell something, right? Like, it can be really hard. You can get caught up in all the emotions of it, like, oh, it's at 1,000, went to 5,000. What if it goes to 50,000? Well, would you buy it at 5,000? If the answer is yes, then maybe you keep holding it. If the answer is no, then I would sell it. And if you're in between, you're not sure what you would do, well, then you're probably not making a wrong decision either way. That can be like when it's the most stressful. You're like, I'm not sure if I would buy it at its current market price. Well, in those situations, I sort of think there probably isn't a right or wrong answer. And a lot of times when I feel that way about an item, I'll just throw it up on eBay and make the buy it now price significantly higher than the current market price. That way I feel good about, hey, if someone wants to overpay me a little bit for this, I'll take it. And if not, I'm okay holding it too. So those are my 5 big tips as it relates to collectibles, and I hope they help you build your collection in a way that is going to help you make money in the long term and enjoy collecting as much as possible at the same time. So those 5 tips: number 1, know your goals. Number 2, research rarity. Number 3, consider importance. Number 4, dollar cost average. And number 5, if you wouldn't buy, sell. So good luck collecting, good luck investing, good luck doing both, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.